Welcome to the New Dentist Study Club podcast. My name is Dr. Sanj Mohanta. We're going to learn about clinical management, practice management, and the emotional management of dentistry. Let's learn how to be happier in dentistry. Let's go. Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me on another special episode where I have Bob Hope, who is a practice management consultant. He is going to teach us everything you've ever wanted to know about finding a practice, what to look for besides location, the data, what to look for in the contract. So this is a great episode if you're thinking about buying an existing office. So Bob, welcome to the pod.
So, Sanj, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this opportunity and sharing any kind of insights and see where the conversation goes. I've been in dentistry I stopped counting at 30 years. And you might say, well, Bob, how can that? I was very young when I started. I was very young when I started. And have gained a lot of experience over the years. It originally started from a software standpoint. We developed software. I then got much more into the consultative side of practices where I would go in and where I thought I was doing some training, it kind of turned into developing and putting systems in place for efficiencies and ideally growth and growth of the business and of the team. I then got into doing a lot of, I would facilitate some meetings on behalf of Sonicare, like Philips, with industry players. I became an instructor at one of the private hygiene colleges for 5 years. And so I wanted to make sure, though my background isn't clinical, I wanted to make sure that my curriculum for my students was consistent with the current standards of care and teachings. So I got all the books and I read up on all the evidence-based research and the science and reason and rationale behind, so that when I'm working with clinicians potentially in that capacity, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight, then I've got some of that again, the background to support it. So and then I speak at conventions. So I've spoken across Canada at various conventions on topics. So I've developed a lot of sort of expertise, skill, and knowledge, broad-based, because a lot of my consulting clients are not necessarily clients of my software. So it's incumbent on me when I go into those offices to learn about their technology very well, so that I can put the systems in place that fit that particular program. And so it's given me a good perspective of the industry.
Oh, that's good. We're so lucky to have you and to share your expertise. So, Bob, for the audience who's looking to buy an existing practice, what's the first thing they should look for?
So I have to say the appraisers have really gotten a lot better over the years. You know, when I think back a few decades or a couple decades ago, you would get a report, and the buyer, so the new dentist, like looking to purchase the practice, doesn't always know. They don't know what they don't know, so they don't know how to scrutinize it or like what to be more curious about. And then even if they were curious about it, how to go about it. You know, years ago, it was before paperless offices and so on. Appraisers would randomly go into the paper charts, randomly pull about 100 and make an assumption based on that. So the accuracy was not there. So they've gotten a lot better. We've worked with a number of appraisers ourselves from our software standpoint, where somebody is selling, and so they bring on an appraiser, and we help provide a lot of that sort of detail to be so that report can be fairly accurate. But so the sort of four areas that I kind of break it down into. Number one is what are you buying potentially? So what a report doesn't necessarily tell you everything. It's a good start, but the location of the practice could be an issue. Does it have visibility? I helped a client just 2 years ago now. He was looking, and he was an associate at one of my clinics that I went in to do some training and coaching, and we really hit it off. And probably about 6 or 8 months later, he reached out and contacted me and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the associate, and he said, I've since left there, but I really liked what you had to say, and I'm curious. I'm looking at buying a practice, but I have no idea where to start. I don't know what to do. I've got a prospectus, I've got an appraisal rather, and but I'm just wondering, like, you've got lots of experience. Can you give me your sort of insights? So he sent it to me, and I looked at it, and I said, there looks like there's something here, but let's put some meat on those bones. I said, ideally we need to go on site And you need to do a couple of things when you're on site. You need to look at the facility. Is it
Mm,
relatively in good shape? Is it like a disaster? Is it like, does it
mm.
need a reno big time? Do they have carpeting in the operatories? Like, so just the state of the equipment, the chairs, how many chairs are there? And then being on site, what is the visibility and convenience? Is there parking? Is the neighborhood kind of sketchy, or is it affluent, or somewhere in between? And
Mm,
so by being on site, you can kind of get a really good feel for a lot of those things, which we did. So the first office that he was looking at, and he was very open. He said, um, my wife and I are very flexible, so we don't have to be GTA. We don't have to be anywhere particular in this practice within Barrie. And so I said, ideally, then what we should be doing is I need to get in again because of my experience with the various programs. I said I kind of need to get my hands on the computer and the data and do a bit of an assessment, an analysis. I'm very numbers driven, and we're going to talk about that.
mm,
And while you are going around from operatory to operatory and looking at things and chatting with the seller, um, while you're and getting a feel for those things. So I want you to be mindful of, the visibility, the convenience, what are the hours that they're open. So everything's sort of
mm.
location related. And while I'm, in some cases, I sort of feel like I'm Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible because I feel like I'm being secret. Like I put my thumb drive in the thing and I'm downloading a bunch of reports.
Mm.
I collect a lot of data. I don't necessarily do it right there on the spot. I collect it, and then so we met at the Barrie office. We did all that, and then I think it was on a Saturday or Sunday, and that's often the case too because often the team might not know that the practice
Mhm.
is closed, so it's often after hours. So I then went home and did my stats analysis, and it really is enlightening. So I'll give you some of the top bullet points of what I kind of look for from a number standpoint. And the ideal is that the numbers support that it's not in great shape. If you think about it, only 10% of dental practices can be in the top 10%. So
Mhm.
more half of dental offices are in the bottom 50%, meaning they're poorly run. Those are the ones
Yes.
that ideally you want to kind of get. I've got a client
Oh,
that
okay.
I've helped him purchase we're just looking at his 10th office just recently, and throughout Ontario and across Canada. And the most recent one, I said, sorry, buddy, I got to tell you, like, this is a really well-run machine, so it's going to cost more. So ideally, we kind of want to get a bad report card because then, because it will identify opportunities so that you can
Yes.
create that growth quickly and, pay down that loan even quicker. So some
Okay,
of the things that,
so Bob, before you go on further,
yeah,
you said that when you went to that dentist, appraisal on-site visit, you were on the computer. Are you allowed to do that? Are you
well,
allowed to
yeah,
go into the system and pull data?
yeah, and I think that's actually more and more like when I did it for the most recent client where they're in really, really
Mm.
good shape. It was on the East Coast, and so I had to do it remotely. I couldn't be on site,
Okay.
so but it had to be after hours, and because nobody
Hmm.
knew, and so
Okay.
but they knew that so
Mm.
the and I tell all my clients, let them know that I've got a consultant. He just wants to like they all think consultants are just going to like look at reports. I often can get into the guts of the database and do queries and extract
Okay.
a little bit more information um, than like a lot. All we've all heard the saying, "Garbage in, garbage out," and
Yes.
what that refers to is if you document poorly in the computer, then what you're trying to pull out is going to be poor results. And so,
Yes.
one of the most common errors that I find in all the programs is the hygiene program is, from a management standpoint, is poorly executed because of just the mishandling of the intervals. So you
Oh,
know,
okay.
years ago, patients were 6 to 9 month intervals because of the recall
Yeah.
exam. Whereas now, well, no, we identify if the patient is a candidate for a perio,
Hmm.
and so they might be on 3 or 4 month intervals where the exam
Yes.
is every second or whatever. And the way in most offices, the way that they're documenting that um, is poor. And so
Mm.
often the owners don't know. They don't know that the data um, is being poorly. So that it's good. That's why it's good to make sure
Okay.
you know and understand the software that which on that on-site thing. Apart from looking at the state of the equipment and the facility in terms of renovation and so on, is the software. So what is the software? Are you familiar with it? And then make sure, if not, that you get at that proper training so that you don't that you're not dependent on something that you're unable to control.
Yes, good. Thank you. And I also want to highlight something you said about buying an office that may be just mediocre and not the best. Because
Yeah,
when you buy that office, you have to be able to pay off that business loan and pay the interest on it. So you have to
yeah,
be able to make more money than the existing dentist is making now. So you have to
absolutely.
see opportunities like maybe they're not open on the weekends. Maybe they're
Yes,
not doing root canals. Like, so you have to see like, how can I add value to this office? So if it's already a very high functioning business, it's going to be really hard to
yes,
succeed, to do
exactly.
better than them.
Yes, and so one of the first two things I look from a number standpoint is what is the true population of the practice.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
a lot of times it might be an inflated number because
Hmm.
I just did analysis with a client yesterday, and they've got close to 1,000 patients marked as active, but they haven't been there in over 2 or 3 years, so they're kind of not
Hmm.
really active. So I kind of filters that I'll look at. Well, how many patients have actually been physically seen in the practice and have a
Hmm.
status of active in the last 18 months and 24 months, and that 6 month gap kind of gives an idea of how many are maybe slowly being pushed out. I like to look
Okay.
at I like to look at the number of new patients per month as an average as well, because that gives a bit of an idea of intake and dropout.
Yes. Yeah.
And then with that patient base, I like to look at the demographics. So, that maybe they've got a ton of kids and they're referring all the ortho out. So, and you have an
Mm.
opportunity of keeping ortho or doing ortho, and that right away elevates it. Maybe you've got a lot of
Yes.
patients in the 50s and 60s, and you're referring out implants or
Hmm.
other types of dentistry, whether it's cosmetics or whatever. That again, that might be an opportunity to raise the revenue source. If
Hmm.
a so that's what part of it also is to find out. I do an analysis of, well, what codes have they done in the last year compared to the previous year in terms of
Okay.
procedure. So in other words, what type of dentistry are they doing? Because then obviously whatever they're not doing, they're referring out. And
Hmm.
and does that align with the new dentist purchasing the practice with what they want to do, what they enjoy doing, or if they have colleagues that they want to bring in? That's happening a lot in a lot of offices.
Mm.
And so the demographics will inform the treatment opportunities. And are those being referred out, or are they already in house? That creates a big opportunity. And then based on those demographics, patients over the age of 30, what are their um, hygiene intervals? So how
Okay.
periodically engaged are they? Because with more hygiene is more restorative. And
Yes.
right, so those are a lot of the numbers that I'll take a look at. I'll also look at what their how many chairs they have, and to what
Mhm.
degree in the last most recent 12 weeks that they're booked. So is hygiene minimally 90% booked with 10% open time, or is it more? The doctors, um, does the number of patients support the number of hygiene hours they have available? The analysis I just did yesterday, the doctor has about 91 hours a week of hygiene. And I said, you need right now 133. Like, you could add a full-time hygienist 40 hours a week right now without worrying about growth or changing anything.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, that's great that you can do that with the numbers. So
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
what are some red flags at
Some red
dental
flags.
office acquisition? Mhm.
Great. So um, I an example of one that I had done a few years back, the asking price is fairly high, and so based on the patient base, and when I got in and did my analysis, I could see, because I also look at what proportion are the patients have insurance, private insurance, co-insured if they're dual, and to what degree they have social assistance. And this practice, what they were doing, their total billings were very high. And when I looked at it, they had about 35 or 40% of their patients were ODSP. And so they were bill.
Ontario, yeah, that's the Ontario Disability Support Program. So it's a government
So
program that reimburses at like 34% of a fee
it's
guide.
terrible. And
Yeah.
majority of the offices will charge that fee guide, and then they take the payment. There's no balance. This office was billing everybody at the current dental fee guide. When the payment would come in, they would do a write off. So they would have a high predominance of
Yes.
write offs, and that was a red flag. Like, why so much being written off? So we want to look at, in the course of the year, the billings, and a lot of
Okay.
cases, the billings, depending on the computer software, the program, they include lab in that total billings, and you don't make
Oh,
anything.
okay. Yes.
So you want to make sure that you pull that out, and then look at, of that in the last year, what is the proportion of write-offs? You want to keep that 2% maximum. Ideally, I like to keep it under 1.5%, where your collections are 98 to 100%. So in the course of the
Mm.
year, you cover your billings separated out from lab, write-offs, and collections. And that gives you an idea, where they're at from an AR control standpoint, but
Okay.
also accuracy of, that they're not inflating something to make it look bigger.
Okay. So that's a red flag when the numbers don't add up. Like,
Another red flag, it drives me nuts when I go into offices, and this is not even just purchasing, but is when the interval for the next hygiene visit is 4.5 months. And this was, owing to the time that I spent at the hygiene college teaching.
mhm.
There's no evidence-based research that says 4 months and 2 weeks is the appropriate
Yeah.
clinical time to address the
Yeah.
period condition.
Yeah.
And so what that tells me is it's a team that says, well, it's half of 9 months. We'll just bring in half of nine. And I would rather, so when I look at a practice, clinically, if a patient is a perio candidate, there should probably be a higher predominance of, in the adult patients particularly, of 3 months over four. And that's for two
Hmm.
reasons. One, there's the clinical rationale, but the second is behaviorally, um, easily a third to 40% of patients, when they come in, are at least a few weeks or a month or so overdue, meaning in,
Yes.
in a 12-month span, very few 3-month patients come in exactly 4 times. They wind up
Yes.
coming in 3 times. So the same
Yes.
is true of those 4-month patients. They really behaviorally wind up coming in twice a year. Those 4.5 months get
Oh,
for sure. So
okay.
we're not really treating them as perio. So then when I circle back and see there's an opportunity here because they're not really managing their hygiene, and that's usually a communication issue that the hygienists are
Mm.
not comfortable maybe about explaining what their findings are and making a recommendation.
Okay.
And again, more hygiene is more restorative. So
Yes.
the easiest way to build a practice is build up the hygiene, and then we talk about restorative. Then we talk about putting systems in place for presenting. The office I did again yesterday was predominantly basic restorative and hygiene. They refer almost everything out, and this is one of the opportunities the doctor's looking at increasing and keeping in house. Um, and again, they have the same thing from a red flag in terms of just the hygiene management. What I'll look at is if I see they have a lot of patients that are on the adult patients, let's say are a 3 or a 4 or even a 4.5 month. I want to look at compliance. So how good are they at not just pre-booking but keeping the patients in the schedule so that they're ultimately treated. And to do that, I start by looking at, well, what are they typically billing in per hour that they're working. So again, if the hygiene schedule is, we'll say 85-90% booked during that 12 weeks, then during that chair time, what was the billings that came out of that chair time, and then divide it out, because it should level out. So if you look at 4 units of scaling is in the Ontario fee guide is $261. So that's scaling only for an hour. But if you did 3 units of scale, a recall, half a polish, and maybe bite wings, that's more like around 330 mark. So you kind of want to have an idea that you should be somewhere around there. So for instance, what you don't want to see is that they schedule a full hour and the only thing billed is 2 units of scaling. So we want to make sure that the culture of the practice
Mm.
understands and knows how to bill appropriately. Because if not, then when we purchase a practice and come in and work with the team, we don't want to overwhelm them. Oh, ever since the new dentist came
Mhm.
in, he or she just is money, money, money. We want to make sure the message isn't that,
Okay.
but we want to make sure there's proper appropriate accountability. So then I look at what the codes that they use. So I'll see that, okay, they use the 11113, for instance, on
Mhm.
adults. So predominantly, yeah, you'll have 2.5, but then I average it out over the last 12 months. If typically they would do, let's say 2.5 units, we'll lowball it. Probably it's more like 3, but if it's 2.5 units on an adult, and if they did come in 3 times in the year, then it should be around 7.5 units on average. And to be surprised, it's always significantly lower. So it's around 4 or 5.
Wow. Okay.
So, and the patients have the insurance coverage for it, but we're not delivering it. And again, clinically, we know that they're better off if they do attend those visits,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's where I really get into the detail on where are they at from a hygiene standpoint, because that's the first thing to probably improve and see a quicker yield. And then with
Okay.
that, like I said, comes more restorative.
Okay. Good. So you talked about the data. How about the team? Should we be looking at the
Yeah.
staff? Okay.
Um, yeah. So from a team standpoint, so let's say we do our data analysis. We're like, hey, there's some good stuff here. There's some good growth
Yeah.
opportunity. The location looks good. We don't have to sink a ton of money into doing a reno, maybe some touch ups, but um, and there's parking and the hours are good, availability. So then I would encourage to, from a team standpoint, starting with, and I did, maybe even asking the current owner, is again, it gets into the culture of the practice. What current policies do you have now? For instance, are you assignment, or are you
Hmm.
non? Do you accept CDCP and do you balance bill? That's a biggie.
Okay.
Um, if a patient's a complete no-show, what do you do? Do you bill them, or
Mm.
like what happens? Um,
Okay.
do you thank referrals to encourage more
Hmm.
referrals? Do you ask for Google reviews?
Hmm.
Any form of like a new patient follow-up? Because these are all important things to grow and build a practice. And hopefully there's a lot of no's, or well, hopefully they're not organized. We want to make sure they're balanced billing, ideally on the CDCP. But you want to have an idea like what kind of you're buying into from just internal some policies, because that's what the
Okay.
team culture is, right? Because you're, as the
Okay.
new individual, they're like, they're going to be scrutinizing, right? Um,
Yes.
you want to find out what systems they have. So how do you manage the accounts receivable? Who and how do you manage the hygiene schedule? Who and how do you manage the doctor's schedule in terms of presenting? Do you do consultations? Do you use internal cameras?
Mm.
And do you do comprehensive dentistry, or and if they don't, and the new owner does, then that's again great opportunity. But then it's going to take some coaching with a team to get them to that.
Hmm.
And don't be surprised that a lot of them are like, I don't know, like, because often a lot of the offices they just don't, they um, they just kind of, it's an interesting industry because everyone is in their private quarters all day long.
Yeah.
Everyone's working hard. Like no one's just here to
Yeah. It's true.
like everyone's working hard, but maybe not as efficiently as possible. And
Yes.
so, and then at the end of the day, everyone leaves, and so we never
Yeah.
kind of get a chance to like check in on things. So that's why it's
Yeah. It's
important
true.
to have an idea of what kind of targets we want to be maybe going for, and then measure them and reflect. And so from a team standpoint, I would then get into um, what staffing do they have now, ideally finding out what the current payroll is. So what are the pay
Okay.
rates? um, how long have they been there? Are we anticipating potentially new hires, or and then those things kind of lead into then the contract. We talked a little bit about the
Hmm.
contract. Three things that I would make sure that recommend that new owners are looking into when they're purchasing is, number one, they want to find out and have an agreement in terms of, is the current owner staying on for any period of time?
Hmm.
You'll get some. I have a client of mine. We built up a beautiful practice in London, and then she sold it internally, and it was her choice. But she said, um, the team isn't going to know. They're going to come in on. I'm going to tell them on Friday that on Monday we have a new owner, and they were very very for. I didn't. I kind of didn't. It wasn't my choice, and it wasn't to
Hmm.
make. I didn't love the idea, but it was her choice, and she lucked out because she's amazing, and the new owner is equally amazing. So
Oh,
it,
good.
it was a nice transition. They were shocked. And it's that reaction they never want, because then they get, well, what else don't we know? Um,
Yes.
but usually the previous owner stays on for a period of time. And I know of one case where a doctor it was a client of mine years ago that I'd worked with him on another office. He took over this office, and the previous owner just kind of wanted to stick around for 3 days, 2 days a week, and because he just wanted to still be busy, but I didn't want the hassle of owning the practice. Um, and it was a 2-year duration in the contract, and at the 2-year mark, there was no way or indication that he was going to leave or plan on leaving or anything else. And during that time, my client kept saying, "It's his staff. It's still his office." He said, "It's not my office
Wow.
yet." Because so I would recommend, if the previous owner, because there's a lot of goodwill to the previous staff and a lot of goodwill to the
Yes.
owner, but I would limit it to probably a 1 year window.
Okay.
And if they're sticking around, then and then just make sure you celebrate that anniversary date, and that
Yeah.
because you need to to sink your roots in and
Good.
define by whatever is important to you. So that is number one. Number two, I usually recommend the accounts receivables. So whatever their outstanding accounts receivable is, what you don't want, and this has happened in some offices, is what they often will say is, well, we'll collect it for 90 days. So whatever your AR is, we'll collect it, but then you're constantly having to pay it back to the previous owner because you're collecting
Mm.
their money and so on. I usually recommend, whatever the AR is, tell them, I'll give you 80 cents to the dollar. So you're assuming, right, we're going to write off 20% of it. So part of the purchase is, I'm going to give it to you, and then whatever we collect, we just keep. So if you collect
That's a
more,
smart idea. Yeah.
it's just a clean break instead of this
Yeah.
ongoing.
Yeah.
The third thing that I urge and recommend is that you would require the seller to arrange any termination pay. So where, and again, this would be where they would give them the heads up and say, I'm going to be selling the practice. You've been with me for 20 years. I'm a very loyal client. And for 20 years, your termination pay would be X dollars. And so that should all be built into the purchase price of the practice. Because what you don't
Okay.
want as a new owner, because this has happened a lot, is you inherit the new staff and you have somebody
Mm-hmm.
who just philosophically is not aligned or
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get along maybe or whatever,
Yes.
and you push through and it just doesn't work out, and then for you to
Mm-hmm.
terminate is a fortune. Like it costs, it could
Yeah.
be a 2-year salary potentially, because the ESA, the Employment Standards Act, calls for
Mm-hmm.
one week per year served. But the courts don't always agree with the ESA, where they'll say,
Mm.
well, wait a minute, let's look at the age, let's look at the,
Yes.
their work schedule and everything else. They'll reward as much as 1 month per year served. And so then you're saddled
Mm.
with a staff that again, you want to anticipate and assume that you're going to, so you would tell the new staff, I'm giving you a contract that reflects everything you had before. So I'm not cutting your hours. I'm not paying you differently.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's going to change, but your benefit for that loyalty is to your previous employer, and ideally, so it's a
Mm.
clean break. So if it doesn't work, you can let them go. It's not going to cost a fortune, and then you onboard your team that is a fit for you, because the
Okay.
team is
So
most.
you get, so yeah, I totally agree. And if there's going to be a new owner, the patients are going to, feel unsettled. But if they see that the office looks the same, the team's the same, they're loyal to the team, they'll come back and you'll have better patient retention.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's critical because it's a relationship industry, and they've developed
Yes.
relationships, and so you want to leverage that for sure. And and you want to make sure that you meet individually with each staff member to introduce yourself and your vision, and hear them out one on one with just to have
Mm.
a meeting of the minds, and tell me what you love about dentistry, what are some of your frustrations, and then make sure, because staffing is the team is the most critical part. So as much as I come into offices and I put my systems in place and everything else, if the team isn't on board and sailing that ship, it doesn't matter, right? And so you need a team that is enthusiastic and excited about the new changes or the new opportunities.
Mhm.
And so you want to touch in, especially with the younger generations. You need to touch in more frequently to make sure they're good, or any thoughts on where we can make some changes in practice to improve things. Have routine team meetings. The team meetings could be once a month. It could be an extended lunch. It could be a 2-hour lunch, or every second or third month. I've got some clients where we do routine team meetings, usually for an afternoon, maybe 3 or 4 hours, twice a year. We do it in June. We do another one in December. Another one we'll do it quarterly. We do it for a year, and that's just to keep the team engaged, right? Because again,
Okay.
uh, we're talking about a lot of ideas and everything else, but at the end of the day, everyone leaves, and we don't get a chance unless they cross
Yes.
each other in the hallway. That
Yeah.
it's important to carve out that time for the team development, because retention. When you get that right team,
Hmm.
you want to hang on to them, because it just bleeds any organization where you're just constantly in the rehiring mode.
Yeah.
It is a real drag. So the team is critical.
Oh, thank you, Bob. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up the episode?
Oh my God. Let me see. Did that. I'm just gonna check my notes. Oh, it's critical as well. When I would argue that treatment planning in general is probably the poorest executed functions in dentistry. So when I look at the on the building up the restorative side, the doctor schedule, are there associates? Maybe there's an opportunity to bring in associates or specialists and so on. So I'll look at the codes that were billed, and that will inform what is probably being referred out. But then I look at what codes and to what extent are planned. I'm shocked at how many offices only will treatment plan um, things that are an estimate. So something that's going to the insurance company, a night guard or a crown. But the meat, of most GP offices is the basic restorative. And if it's not treatment planned and documented, officers will say, well, we always book it and they'll always get it done. But if it's not treatment planned, it can't really be followed up. And ideally, it shouldn't just be treatment planned, where treatment planning should be more about a series of visits. So if the patient needs to come in for an hour on quad one, 40
Mm-hmm.
minutes on quad three, and whatever, that should be documented. It shouldn't just be a list of codes for $2,800. Because if the patient calls and
Yes.
says, I need to get those fillings, how well can they answer,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of patients will ask questions, well, how long am I there? And what does he or she
Yes.
do? And if I just see a list of codes, I'll be like, I have to get back to you. So treatment planning, so hygiene is usually a mess with the intervals, and treatment planning is a disaster with the
Okay.
which is a good thing.
Okay.
So when I see that, there's like, and so that when you do buy it, you just don't want to repeat those same things. So that's why I
Yes.
want to have, some coaching that comes in with some of that framework and then support for the team to make sure that it's a success.
Oh, that's great, Bob. You've been very insightful. So for dentists who are looking at purchasing an existing office, besides looking at ads in dental journals and dental websites, like would you suggest that they also go to like sign up with practice brokers so they're getting a listing every couple of weeks of new practices for sale?
Absolutely, and that's
Mm.
what the client who took me to Barrie, because we went to
Yeah.
Barrie.
Okay.
We had another one near Hamilton, and then he wound up settling in Waterloo. And so he just said, keep sending me stuff. And he had sort of a ballpark range in terms of how big of a practice. He wanted something smaller, like 4 or 5, maybe 6 operatories. He
Hmm.
didn't want to have something huge, and from a budgeting standpoint,
Yes.
and it may be a location as well. But absolutely, and I would entertain a few of them. There's various companies that provide appraisals. Usually, if you go to your local provincial dental association meeting,
Hmm.
your annual, they always have booths there. So go by and meet them and see if you get it. If you hit it off, if something resonates. By all means, like pull out all stops. Like often, like you say in the journals, they'll have practices for sale. I had a client that he looked in a certain area. It was in rural Ontario, and so he looked in an area, and in the RCDSO book, it shows the year of graduation. So he looked in that area. He's like, I think these guys are probably going to retire soon. So he approached them. He said, if you're thinking of,
Wow.
I love the area and I want to move up here, and if you're ever thinking about selling your practice, let me know. So you
That's
never know.
great. Yeah, do the cold calls. My friend sold his office just from, a young
Yeah.
dentist walking up to him and saying, I'd love to buy your office. And he sold
Well,
it to her.
and I think so, and I think that's really impressive as well because, and so he wound up buying it, and I think
Yeah.
for it was a year later. He said, "No, I'm not really looking at retiring anytime soon." It's like, okay, but if you think,
Yeah.
but they kind of hit it off, and you think of it, for a lot of doctors, that's their baby. They
Yeah.
nurtured it. They don't want to just dump it to just anyone, and so
Yes.
you want to have that connection and that personal,
Yes.
where something kind of clicks.
Yeah, that's great. So, Bob, this is fantastic that you help dentists not just with managing their own practices, but acquiring their next practice. So, how can the audience contact you?
Oh, please do. I'm always accepting new
Mhm.
clients.
Okay.
I'm good to speak at study clubs. I do a lot of engagements. Again, the consulting arrangement, and the consulting arrangement is unique to every practice. So I do it for very established practices or someone starting out new. So the challenge is very unique and identify to each individual. It's individualized. So usually what I call my COE, my complete oral exam and PAN, which
Okay.
which is my data analysis. I meet with a
Okay.
team, and then just like you would, I then share my findings, and then we make
Okay.
a recommendation for correction, which is my treatment plan.
Okay. Okay, good.
um, and then software. If anybody is interested in software, we've developed customized software as well to run the practice
Okay.
on with a lot of great features. Enough said on that. But I do. The best way to reach me would be my website is TimeShift, all one word,
Okay.
timeshift.solutions.com. Um, my email, I always just give. I've got a TimeShift Solutions, but my favorite email is bobhope, so
Hmm.
BOBHOPE at rogers.com. So if
Okay.
you do it from my website, it forwards it to my rogers.com, and or my cell number is 416-904-4673, and texting and or calls, whatever. And then we would coordinate a time to chat and to find out what hurts, and so that I know what to
Okay.
treat.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Bob, for your time and sharing all your wisdom. And to the audience, if you have your own practice and you want some practice management advice, connect with Bob. And if you're interested in buying an office, also connect with Bob. He is the Tom Cruise that you need to get the data, to tell you whether to buy that office or not. We all need a guide like Tom Cruise or Bob Hope. So thank you
Yay!
very much. Thank you, Bob. And thank you to the audience for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the New Dentist Study Club podcast. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, as well as our Instagram page at New Dentist Study Club. Check out our link in bio, and you can register to be a member and attend one of our live in-person events in Toronto. Thank you so much for listening. Please share this episode with your friends and stay tuned for our next episode.